Valve has officially discontinued the Steam Deck LCD, so let's talk about what that means for right now and into the future. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about Steam hardware. Hope you're having a great week playing a ton of video games, and I hope if you wanted a Steam Deck LCD, you bought one, because they are officially killing support. I gotta level with you guys. I have run out of witty ways to ask you to subscribe to the channel. I'm just gonna point out that 75% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed. It was going down, and then with all the new people who bought Steam Decks over the past couple of months, it went back up. Subscribe, set your notifications to all. You will be notified every time I upload a video, and then I'll get a silver plaque on the wall when I hit 100K. It's a win-win for everyone involved. But yeah, let's get into this breaking Steam Deck news. So right when I was finishing up my work for the week, I saw a news story go up on Windows Central that was like, hey, Valve has announced they're discontinuing the Steam Deck LCD. So I went over to steamdeck.com, I clicked get yours, I looked at that little layout of the Steam Deck LCD and the two versions of the Steam Deck OLED, and not only is the Steam Deck LCD out of stock, but underneath it on a desktop, you can't do this on your phone, you'll see a little message that says they're killing production of the Steam Deck LCD, and when they're completely sold out, they're completely sold out. Now, it's out of stock right now, but I'd imagine that's mostly because of the Christmas sale. They got to find a bunch of units laying around, and I'm sure they'll do one more batch, on the website that they'll sell, but it really is the end of the Steam Deck LCD, and that's surprising on the one hand, not so surprising on the other. The biggest reason it's surprising to me is that multiple times over the past year, they've put it on sale for $320, and without fail, every time that happens, I see so many more people here on the channel for at least a few weeks when they're looking up everything to do on their Steam Deck. They're letting people know in the comments that they're so excited they got a Steam Deck LCD, and then when the sale ends, those people kind of go away, and it goes back to people being in the comments like, oh my god, I finally bought a 512 gig Steam Deck OLED. I absolutely love it, but when they put it on sale, it is extremely popular, which is getting more Steam Decks out into the wild. It's getting more people using Steam OS. They can collect valuable data. So like keeping it around makes sense from that perspective. But on the other hand, there's a few reasons why it's not so surprising. I think Valve has kind of moved past the need for the Steam Deck LCD, mainly because they said when the Steam Deck OLED came out that it's not necessarily a mid-gen refresh from the traditional perspective. It's the Steam Deck they always wanted to make, right? Like they started producing the Steam Deck around the end of the whole lockdown situation, the COVID situation, and I'm sure the supply constraints on everything resulted in them kind of having to strip out pieces they initially wanted to include, like of course the OLED screen and all of the minor improvements that came along with the OLED. I think the chip improvements were just a happy accident, like because they had to wait to start producing the Steam Deck OLED, they went a little bit farther in terms of what they improved with it to make it feel like more of a mid-gen refresh, but for all intents and purposes, the Steam Deck OLED is the Steam Deck they originally wanted to make. Also, we get to talk about the memory shortage once again. The Steam Deck LCD original model had a 64 gigabyte drive in it that wasn't a SSD. It was like shaped like an SSD. It fit in the same slot, but it was a lot slower. It was basically on par with a micro SD card. And it was like one of those situations where it's like the old PSP where it has onboard storage, but it's only really meant for the operating system and maybe one or two games. What you really needed to do with the original Steam Deck LCD was buy a 2230 drive or a micro SD card to expand your storage. Then when the Steam Deck OLED came out, they upgraded the Steam Deck LCD to a 256 gigabyte SSD. And that was great for a little while, obviously, because they could still sell it for $400 and theoretically make a profit or at the most break even. But now that memory is more expensive. Putting a 256 gig drive in your dirt cheap model is not really tenable if you're trying to break even or make a profit, right? With how much memory cost, storage costs have exploded over the past couple of months or so, it probably put them in a situation where they were already on a razor thin margin and it pushed it over the edge. And when you get into a situation like that, where the next tier up is only $150 higher, you really only have two options, right? Like you could raise the price and start approaching 500, which will then convince everyone to say, well, I'm already spending $500 on this Steam Deck LCD. I may as well pay $50 more for the OLED because I'm a dedicated Deck Ready viewer and Jimmy has completely sold me on the Steam Deck OLED. And then Valve is just stuck with a huge pile of Steam Deck LCDs that they put into production when they ran out of the last batch, and they don't know what to do with them. So they're going to have to sell them at even more of a loss by putting them on a sale of like $320 or less. And then if they only raise the price a little bit, like to $450, if memory prices keep going up, in 6 months they could find themselves in the exact same situation, and then they'll have to kill production on it anyway. So like, I think they were kind of forced to make this call, so it's not necessarily the biggest deal or the end of the world. Also, with the Steam Deck LCD kind of out of the way, that could open up the possibility for the Steam Deck OLED to start going on sale, like next summer sale or the next Christmas sale. Maybe it could happen. I don't think it will, because I'm pretty sure the reason they're getting rid of the LCD is because of rising memory costs. So like if a 256 gig SSD is too expensive, a 512 is going to be even more expensive. So like they got to really play it safe by putting it on sale. So like my read on the situation overall is I feel for the people who were waiting to buy a Steam Deck LCD because, you know, they couldn't afford it when it was $320 and they were hoping it would go on sale again. But like beyond that, I think it was fine to kill off the LCD, because if you have not used a Steam Deck OLED, you really aren't going to understand this, but it really is that much better. That very marginal performance improvement doesn't necessarily help in overall FPS, but it helps with frame times and 1% lows, which are the biggest problem if you're someone who notices stuttering or weird frame time issues like I do. They refined a lot of the buttons too. The OLED screen is amazing. Like the improvements are noticeable right when you take it out of the case that it comes in the box, if you've ever used a Steam Deck LCD. And if it really is the perfected form of the Steam Deck, I feel like, you know, it makes sense for that to be the only one they're selling. Another thing that I think is worth taking into account is that even though they have all this hardware now, right? Like they've got the Steam Deck, they've got the Steam Machine, they've got the Steam Frame, the Steam Controller. Eventually they're going to have a Steam Deck 2. Valve is not a massive company and they don't like scale up like other companies, right? So like even when something is extremely successful for what they wanted, like the Steam Deck was, they didn't immediately turn around and hire a mass group of people to come in and start making more hardware. It's still basically the original team that made the Steam Deck working on everything now. So like SteamOS, Steam Deck, Steam Frame, Steam Machine, that's all the same group of people within Valve shipping these things. So if it helps them optimize their workflow and really look towards the future of all of these devices to get rid of the Steam Deck LCD, personally, I'm all for that. And another cool thing that could result from all of this is like this could be a demarcation line in the overall timeline of the Steam Deck lifecycle for them to say, okay, we're getting rid of the Steam Deck LCD. We're happy with where the Steam Deck OLED is at hardware wise. We're still going to keep upgrading it software wise, but in terms of hardware, we can look to the future after the Steam Machine is out and really start getting to work on the Steam Deck 2. And every time I bring that up, a lot of people act like it's way too early for them to even be thinking about it. They probably already have multiple prototypes of the Steam Deck 2 just ready to go sitting in Valve, and they're just waiting for better chips that have better optimization, that most importantly they can get at a good price so they can keep the price competitive and fair. And on top of that, we know Sony is also working on a brand new handheld of their own with AMD. Like they're actively working on a chip with AMD to be a portable PlayStation 5 level of handheld that might even be able to run PS6 games. And when Valve says they want a generational leap in performance without sacrificing battery life, everything we've heard about Sony's eventual handheld is meeting up to all of the standards Valve is setting for the Steam Deck 2. So if AMD, the chip company that Valve is going to partner with to manufacture the Steam Deck 2, is already hard at work on that level of chip that they're looking for, it makes a ton of sense for them to start right now really working hard on the Steam Deck 2. I also want to push back on that Windows Central article a little bit, because they were acting like the Steam Deck LCD at $400 was the only thing keeping the Steam Deck relevant. I want whatever you're smoking, dude, because the Steam Deck OLED is only $150 more than the Steam Deck LCD. It's not that big of a jump. Like on paper, $150 seems like a lot, I guess, but like in reality, if you're already spending $400, it's worth saving up an extra $150 and spending $550 on the Steam Deck OLED. Like there's really no way around it. I know the top line Steam Deck OLED kind of gets into that $749 territory, but the one killer thing that keeps the Steam Deck relevant while all these other handhelds have to release new versions every year is the fact that the Steam Deck had like 30 or something different iterations before it was even announced. Valve put in the hard work to develop something that was basically perfect by the time it came out, whereas all these other handhelds are building the plane while they fly it. The best example of that is the ROG Ally, of course. When that thing launched, there was a huge controversy because it was frying people's micro SD cards. Like 1 terabyte cards were being rendered inoperable because the thing was running too hot. Then magically a year later, they have a brand new iteration that they say addressed fan feedback, and magically it stopped frying SD cards. Of course, they also like 18 months later released the Xbox variants of the ROG Ally. We have the Legion Go, we have the Legion Go S, we have the Legion Go 2. We're about to get a Legion Go 2 with SteamOS. I think there are like 3 MSI claws in the year that it's been available. Like, they are rushing these things out the door. Whereas the Steam Deck, between the LCD and OLED, they made minor refinements that took something that was 99% perfect and made it 100% perfect. It's a different league altogether. And even when you look at prices, which is the one thing they were really comparing on, it's double the price for the best examples of Windows handheld. So yeah, I think the Steam Deck's just fine. And honestly, it makes the choice a lot easier only having the Steam Deck OLED, because I've been saying it for like, what, 2 years now? If you have the money, buy the Steam Deck OLED. So Valve just made the choice easier by getting rid of the Steam Deck LCD. But from like an emotional perspective, I'm pretty bummed because the Steam Deck LCD is what started all of this. I was driving to work. My office was in Pomona and I lived in frickin' Mar Vista back in the day. I had an 1.5 hour long commute every day. I was stuck in traffic on the 10 freeway at that interchange. And then I look at my phone and I was like, is this a joke? Valve is making a handheld? I literally pulled over on the shoulder of the freeway and watched a bunch of videos because I was already stuck in traffic. I rushed to the office and I talked to my friends. I was like, I'm starting a new channel about this thing. And then I'll never forget on my birthday when it showed up for the first time and I got hands-on with it. It was just such a great experience. And this is the best experience I've ever had on YouTube, where everything lined up perfectly, where it's something I'm genuinely excited to talk about. It's something I use every day. And I have this community of people who I love talking to, whether it's on Steam, on X, on here in the comments, who love it just as much as I do. It feels awesome. And all of that is thanks to the Steam Deck LCD. But like, that was just the beginning. That's the silver lining here. That was the start of it all. They deemed it successful. SteamOS is the best it's ever been. We're about to get the Steam Machine. We're about to get SteamOS on a VR headset. And then after that, we can look forward to the Steam Deck 2. Yes, it's a bummer that the Steam Deck LCD is ending, but it's really only onward and upward from here, I think. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.